It's daily delivery debate time. Got Velle Neal III with me right now. Velle, how you doing?
I'm doing swell. Good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for doing it. You're a busy talking guy today. I see a little KFAN logo in the background. That's all right.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's all good. It's everybody's friendly here. It's all good. We know you do a little work for them from time to time, but right now let's talk. Let's talk three things for the daily delivery debate this week. Number one for you, we've got a lot of teams right now in this market that are experiencing or have experienced what I would classify as unscripted or some surprising success. Who among the Lynx, Wild, or Vikings do you consider to be the most surprising? Obviously, you got two teams in season right now and one that just finished up their year a month or so ago.
I think I would rank the Wild third on that list.
Okay.
I know they didn't make the playoffs last year. They look, of course, they have the most points in the NHL at the moment. But the one thing that was going in for them going into the season was that they had this young developing core. Brock Faber, Matt Boldy, Marco Rossi, to go with Kirill Kaprizov and a couple other guys. So, I mean, the arrow wasn't pointing down at all going into the season. What has transpired that's been surprising is how the team has taken a step forward in John Hines' second season. His attention to detail is pretty obvious when you watch him play and play responsible defense in front of Gustafsson. And Gusty's been great. Think about the people who wanted him traded during the offseason. Now, they're lucky that he wasn't traded. And there are some GMs across the league who probably regret not trading for Gustafsson. So I thought they were in position to return to the postseason this year. I didn't see them having the most points in NHL, but I thought they had a good chance of returning to the postseason. I would put the Vikings second. They had a lot of things go wrong last year with Kirk Cousins breaking down and Justin Jefferson being injured. Coming into this year, we knew the defense was going to be good, and that's been just as advertised with Brian Flores at the controls here. Sam Darnold's been the polarizing figure, the guy that no one believed in at the beginning of the year, but he has been above average for them. He had a rough stretch there when he threw 5 picks over a 2 or 3 week span, but then he had games like last week when he stepped up in the fourth quarter and helped them bounce back against the Arizona Cardinals. I know that said, we were expecting the NFC North to be real competitive and the Vikings possibly being third, even fourth in the division. But I still think they were going to be okay at the worst. The Lynx were 19-21 a year ago.
Yeah.
And their defense was atrocious. I think they gave up an average of 107 points a game.
Per possession, probably. Yeah.
Per possession.
Per game,
that's correct.
100 possessions, yeah. 100 possessions, yeah.
They improved that by 11 this year. Cheryl Reeve did one of her best coaching jobs ever. Nafisha Collier stepped up and became an MVP candidate. The move to liberate Courtney Williams and Alana Smith from Chicago, that train wreck that is Chicago, and bring him here was a stroke of genius for Cheryl. It made the Lynx a team that had been bounced out of the first round of the postseason a year ago, a WNBA Finals participant this year. I don't think anyone saw that coming, even for a team that, you could say they should be better this year because they have a point guard now, Williams, and Alana Smith steady. But no one saw them going to the WNBA Finals. So of those 3 teams, I would argue that the Lynx would be the most surprising, followed by the Vikings and followed by the Wild.
I'm inclined to agree. I wish I wasn't because it's fun. It's more fun when I don't. I think if I was going only regular season, and again, these are teams that are at various stages, so it's sometimes the comparison is tough. But I think regular season wise, I'm almost or maybe just as much. You could talk me into being even more surprised that the Vikings are 10-2 than the Lynx were, one of the 3 best teams in the WNBA this year, because I did not think the Vikings were going to be any good at all. If you'd have said at the start of the year, what's more likely, the Vikings go 12-5 or 5-12, I would have said absolutely 5-12.
I get that.
Yeah,
I get that. I mean, I had them at 7-10. because I just didn't believe in Sam Darnold.
No,
And I wrote my mea culpa last Sunday in the
I
paper.
saw that. That was good.
And they promptly go out and win their 10th game, which is more than any Star Tribune writer predicted going into the season. So a lot of us had our doubts about the Vikings. And I guess you're right. Regular season, maybe the Vikings. But man, the Lynx had a hell of a regular season, and they rode to the championship game. And maybe we revisit this in February if the Vikings end up rolling to the Super Bowl, and we could say who's more surprising.
I think you're right though that the Lynx, the way the season ended, that they came within a possession, a controversial possession at that, of winning a WNBA title in a year where the over under for them was like 17 wins in a 40-game season. Like what they did certainly, start to finish, I think elevates them to number one. And I think you're right. I'm surprised by the Wild. I'm glad you brought up Gustafson, because I raised my hand there. I was one of those who was like, what are they doing? They got Wallstead. Let's just turn the page. Let's cut your losses. Let Fleury have one more year. Let him be the savvy veteran that helps Wallstead kind of get acclimated. And, where would they be without Gustafson right now? Obviously, they've been well balanced. It's not just him, but man, he's been terrific this year. They would not be the same team if they had indeed made that trade, like you mentioned.
No, not at all. And now Bill Guerin's making cocky trades where, well, we know we're going to be drafted in the second half of the first round over the next season. So we're going to give a couple of draft picks for this Jurasek guy.
I like it though. I like when GMs, swing for the fences. We liked when Tim Connolly moved up and took Dillingham, and the draft they had, it would just only if they would ever play those guys. And we'll get to the Wolves in a minute. But I like aggressive moves. Sometimes it bites you. Sometimes you go back and you look and say, wish they wouldn't have done that. But if you liked it at the moment, you can't always go back and judge and say, well, hey, they shouldn't have done that because you don't like the outcome. If you like the spirit of the trade, that should be enough to carry your opinion. Lavelle, number 2. How often do you think the Gophers football team should be a realistic contender? And that doesn't just mean like preseason. That means like with the caliber of play, with what you see on the field for at least the first half of the season as things start to progress, for a 12-team college football playoff. How often should they be a realistic contender for a 12-team college football playoff? And likely to expand to 16 at some point, which might change your answer too.
Yeah. As someone who roots for University of Illinois Fighting Illini, I asked myself that question too. What are my standards for that team to be competitive and possibly getting a CFP?
Similar programs, I think.
Brett Bielema he's got them. They've won 9 games this year, which I think is awesome. But they're still on the outside. I think they ended up 20th in the CFP rankings. So it's going to take 10 wins, 11 wins to get into that type of conversation. I would like my football team to be a lock to win 8 or 9 games consistently, with the occasional year in which you can get to 10, maybe 11 wins and make things interesting. I think I can be satisfied as a college football fan if my team does it. Now, if I was a Florida Seminole or a Florida Gator or Florida State Seminole or Alabama Crimson Tide, Roll Tider, I may feel differently. But for the Midwest and the Big Ten, and not being Penn State or Ohio State or even Michigan a year ago, I am satisfied with winning 8 or 9 games. And possibly having a year or two when you get 10 or 11 and make things really interesting. So from that standpoint, I guess you could apply that to PJ too. And it's weird because you look at the Gophers and what they finished with 7 or 8 wins.
7-5 right now. Yeah,
7-5. I like to see a little bit more. And there's a couple games I'm sure PJ would like to have back. North Carolina game and Iowa game, perhaps. Rutgers. Yeah. Exactly. So I think PJ underachieved a little bit this year by winning 7. Although I will say this, I predicted 5 going into the season.
Yeah.
But based on what a fan should want, you should want to see your team, if it's not part of the elite upper class of college football programs, you like to see your team, get to 8 or 9 wins, and then have a year where everything clicks and you're winning 10 or 11.
So you say occasionally, like what's the time frame for you? How often is enough for you to just be in the conversation, like realistically in the conversation, and how often do you need to see them get there? Especially if, if we're talking down the road, like within 5 years, this is going to be a 16-team playoff. That opens it up even a little bit more for an Illinois or a Minnesota. How often do they need to get there, not just contend?
I like to think once every 3 or 4 years, you have one of those years where, you can make things interesting and get into the playoff. Yeah. I can accept that. I'm looking at Bielema. He's about to bring in his 5th recruiting class, I believe. And his recruiting classes have averaged 47th, I think, over those 4-year span. But he's been able to coach these guys up to the point where they won 9 games this year. So it can be done, PJ. It can be done. You have all Big Ten freshmen at center, at safety, and Coy Parrish to build around until someone offers them a bag to go play for somewhere else, because they might as well change National Letter of Intent Day to National Letter of Current Intent Day for these guys who are signing, knowing that there's no chance in 3 years they're going to still be with the program.
NLI,
and that makes it tougher too.
NLI matters less than NIL these days, it seems, but. For me, maybe the Gophers are a slightly different conversation than Illinois, although Illinois is probably a pretty comparable program. I think the Gophers, especially if it expands to 16 teams, I think you're right about the time frame. I'm saying like every 4 or 5 years, I need them to have a real chance. Like 2019, that was a real chance if it would have been an expanded playoff, right? They won 10 games. If they win one more in the regular season, they're potentially in the conversation for a top 4 spot at that point, but they lose to Iowa, they lose to Wisconsin at the end. They win their bowl game, they go 11-2, but they would have been definitely in the conversation that year for a 12, 16 team playoff, at least until the end. And they might have still gotten there. They need to be in the conversation every 4 or 5 years. They need to get there at least, like, let's talk about like every 8 years. You want them in. You want a team that's asking them to be a top 16 team at the end of the year once every 8 years, I don't think is too heavy of a lift, even in this current era.
I agree. And it's also tougher when because let's face it, the Big Ten's going to have 20 teams sooner or later. Probably about the same time to go to a 16-team playoffs. It's going to be a 20-team league. Will you break it up into 2 10-teamers? Will you break it up into 4 5-teamers? Could you have a semifinals before the conference final? I don't know. But they're going to have to figure that out here. Because it's hard to navigate when you have a 20-team league and make headway and get in the upper tier and consider yourself to be one of the best in your conference. So that's just adds another challenge to it all. And then when you bring in teams from the coast, because now we have West Coast teams in the Big Ten, that affects recruiting, because now those teams can recruit up the Midwest and say your friends can still watch you on television, your family can still watch you on television. Yeah. So because we're playing against Michigan and Ohio State, so it's not easy.
No, it is not easy. Last subject for the day: how many games will the Wolves win this year? And I'm going to set the line at 46.5. Over or under 46.5.
That's a tough one, and actually, that's a really good number to pick because we are basically at the quarter pole for the season, right?
As of recording, they're 10-10. They're going to play. They're going to play tonight. We're recording, so when this is live, there'll be one more game in the bag. They'll either be 10-11 or 11-10. But yeah, pretty much half a quarter point.
I would expect this team to play better as the new guys get more acclimated and they work out whatever kinks they need to work out. I think myself, Chip Suhan, and Patrick Royce have all laid out our reasons for why they're not playing well. One or two of those probably need to be applied for them to get things turned around. But I think they'll play better. I don't see them being a 40-win team. I don't know if 50's in play. I like 46.5. I would argue for 45 would be a realistic number for them. 46 is pushing it a little bit, I think. So if I was betting, I would probably say, so that's 35.
So as of right now, they'd have to go 37-25 for the rest of the season to hit the over, at least as of what we're talking about right now.
I think they could do it. I think they could do it. If they remain healthy, if Dillingham continues to make progress. Mike Conley's got to pull his head out of his ass and figure out his shooting goals.
Yeah.
That's always when someone's 37 years old, you're always worried about when they're going to hit the wall and how that is going to look. And
Yeah.
you hope this is just a blip in the screen for him because the point guard's one of the more vital positions on the floor. I mean, I know they have
Yes.
Anthony Edwards, but he's better off when he's not initiating the offense all the time.
Yes.
That puts the onus on Conley. He's got to get going, not shoot 31% from the field, and be a little more reliable offensive threat. And I think the wins will take care of themselves if that happens.
As I've said, I'm concerned that their two true point guards are 37 and 19. That's not a really great. If you took the average, that'd be great. Like a couple of 28-year-old point guards, that'd be all right. But 37 and 19 might not be the ideal ages. I was looking at some of their underlying numbers today, kind of preparing for this. I think their underlying numbers are a little bit better than what their record has shown, and maybe they've gotten a little bit of a goose from going into this Wednesday night game, two really good defensive performances. The last two, like they held the Clippers to 92, they held the Lakers to 80. So their defensive efficiency in the John Hollinger numbers, they're 7th in the league, and I think they're 16th in offensive efficiency right now. Their true shooting percentage and their effective field goal percentage are better than their offensive efficiency. It's turnovers that are killing them. So if they can cut down on the turnovers and keep up something close to this level of defense, I like their chances. I worry though they're lost in their 10-10 start is they had a lot of fairly easy games that they either kind of struggled to win or lost. And the West is going to be an absolute beast this year. So I'm probably still over 46.5, but not by much. Like if I thought,
I agree.
If I thought low to mid 50s at the start of the year, I'm more like mid 40s to upper 40s at this point, and it's going to be probably right around that number. And they're going to be probably hoping they're a 5 or a 6 seed and not ducking into the play-in at this point.
Yeah, mentality is going to come into play here because how many times did we see them fall behind 15, 18, 20 points in games, then have to come running back in the fourth quarter and just falling short? No such thing as moral victories coming back against Boston. I believe the defensive efficiency has dropped to about 14th or 15th in the league. That's a big drop from number one a year ago. So that's something they've got to get figured out. And it's weird because it wasn't like Karl Anthony Towns was a defensive stalwart when he was here. And he's proving that again with the Knicks because now he's playing center and that's being exposed. But the other parts of this defense have kind of broken down as well. So I don't know if they miss Kyle Anderson that much. I don't know. But they got to come out throwing punches, first of all. And they got to find the Doberman defense that they had a year ago.
Well, and so much of defense is energy and cohesiveness, and they've been lacking those things. Like the offense hasn't been great, but you can mask bad offense sometimes if you're just making shots. You can't mask bad defense if someone's missing an assignment, if someone's feet are a little slow, if someone isn't rotating the way they're supposed to go. Like you have to be all five on the same page on defense for it to work. And I think they're getting better there, but it's still charitably called a work in progress, I think, at this point.
You also play defense with this.
With the heart?
Play defense with this. And there's been people in the NBA who have been bone on bone with no cartilage in their knees, able to be functional on defense. That goes back 30, 40 years. So there's things they need to work out.
There are. And they've certainly talked them through. The Ant presser the other day after that the loss that dropped him to 8-10, that was a real eye opener. I mean, I think they know that things haven't been right. I think they're starting to figure it out, but you got to keep doing it every single night. Otherwise, you're just going to get exposed. The league's too good. The West is too good. You can't take any night off, and you can't take a single thing for granted.
Nope, no, you can't.
Awesome, Lavelle. We'll do this again next week. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.